Welcome, everybody. Tonight we are working on Unit 10, and our topic for tonight is NLP model deployment. And mind you, not training, not data pipelining, not experimenting, not refactoring, not word clouding, none of that stuff. We're actually going to try to get some models up and running. And if we're successful here, we can get through everything. It would be basically the completion of the homework. I'm not sure if that's going to be feasible in a 2-hour time frame, but we'll try. um you know I think maybe instead of me like talking things to death here, I'm going to let like the content speak for itself. But I do want to show you when I went through and I posted stuff here today in Unit 10 and made it visible. First of all, the things that we're going through, which are listed up here in the topic list, right? So we talk about these different approaches. We're basically going to focus on this approach, the Streamlit or Streamlight approach. But there are other approaches that you can use and you can deploy locally or in the cloud. I do have the PowerPoint posted, the briefing document, also that video that I'm going to play here in just a moment. Of course, the video I'm recording right now will post here or by tomorrow or maybe the next day. The quiz is available. And then I have a series of resources here. All of these did come straight up from the Intel people, right? They generated all this content. What they normally do, like when I get the files from them, they have, like, let's say with all our labs that we do, they give me a folder that's intended for students, kind of like the starter version of the code, and then you complete it as a student. And then I usually get the faculty version of the code, which has the completed version and notes and a guide for me for teaching. What I'm doing here tonight is I am sharing both the faculty version and the student version for all of it, because the faculty version has documentation that I think is really, really super helpful for going through the process. And I don't pretend to be an expert on this stuff. I'm fairly new to it myself. So I feel it's just better to just share it and let's work on it together in that fashion. I think that's a better learning experience. So what you'll see here, for example, is with the Streamlit app, this is a zip file that has all the files in it that you need. And then, some basic instructions. And then down here, and you can see with the red text here, this is the faculty version. I usually hide it from the students inside of Brightspace and leave it there for other instructors that might teach this in the future. One of their folders did include a video, and I watched it, and it was really very basic, but I'm like, what the heck, I'll just share it anyhow. And then also there is an alternative approach, which is to use the Flask framework, and that also has a student version and the demo and documentation version. For the assignment, normally the way that Intel provides this to me is they have a PowerPoint where they detail assignments. And sometimes I use those assignments and sometimes I create my own, or sometimes I create my own and make theirs extra credit or vice versa, that type of thing. But this, I decided it was probably best to leave it intact as it was because there's a lot more slides than normal. So that will be the slide deck that you use to help guide you through doing the assignment, right? Which is basically to do the demo app up here and then augment it here and deploy it, right? So the stuff we're doing here in class tonight is going to be the foundation for getting the assignment done. I realize this might go like super smooth and easy, right? And this is how deployment stuff sometimes happens. It is a breeze and it just works because, especially if the frameworks are set up nicely for success. Otherwise, it can also turn into a little bit of a hassle depending on certain platforms that you use. I know that later in the course, they're going to point us to use Heroku, which is a very common deployment platform for web applications. However, that one can be super tricky to operate, right? And we'll see how that goes. I'll just put it like that. And I'm giving you guys the heads up now. But with this one, my anticipation is that everything will work. But when you do this assignment, you will be ramping up whatever demos that you've already kind of built. Once again, we're going to be looking at two approaches, but the focus will be more on the Streamlit or Streamlight, if you will, app. Right now, I'm going to play this video here. This was put together with Notebook LM. And once again, as I mentioned before I hit record here, I thought it did a really nice job of putting it together. It's only 6 minutes long. Let's just go ahead and watch it. What I'm going to say right now in the recording so that YouTube doesn't filter it is this was created by Google's Notebook LM. We're doing this for educational purposes. I do not own copyright of the content played in the video on the screen right now. And please close caption it and don't block my video. Thank you, YouTube. All right. Now, it sounds really silly to say that stuff, but I have discovered in other videos, mostly in my database class, like if I would put like if I'd run a query and get an email address up on the screen, YouTube would filter out the whole video because they thought I was sharing somebody's private information, you know. But if I put that little note in the video in the text, they must have some AI algorithm that analyzes what I'm saying and then knows not to filter it. And I have to make the assumption they don't have a bunch of people sitting there filtering their videos manually. It is all done probably with AI and machine learning tools. So I think that's pretty interesting, right? And it all ties into the stuff we're teaching. All right, let's watch the video and see what happens here. I do not think there's closed captioning. So if you require closed captioning, Zoom does have a little button where you can turn on captions. So that is a possibility. But when I do post this video to YouTube, YouTube will close caption it also automatically. But the Google Notebook LM does not do that as it generates the video. All right, let's watch the content here. And if you guys cannot hear it or are having issues with it, please type in the chat or just speak up and we'll restop it, whatever we have to do. So here goes, folks.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to do something really cool. We are taking a piece of AI code and turning it into a live interactive app that anyone, and I mean anyone, can use. We're going to pull back the curtain on how you bring an AI model to life. Okay, so picture this. You've done all the hard work. You've spent weeks, maybe months, training the perfect machine learning model. It's smart, it's powerful, but it's just sitting there on your laptop. If no one can use it, what good is it really? And that quote, it just hits the nail on the head, right? That's the problem we're solving today. We're taking that incredible recipe, your model, and actually serving it up so the whole world can see what it can do. All right, so let's get into it. What do we actually mean when we say deployment? Sounds kind of technical, but it's really just that final, crucial step. So what does that actually mean? Well, in plain English, it's just the process of making your model's predictions available to other people. It's how you turn that static file on your hard drive into a living, breathing tool that can give people answers in real time. And this right here, this is the journey. It's basically a 4-step process. First, you train your model, teaching it from data. Then, and this is super important, you save that model so you don't have to retrain it every single time. Next, you build the app, the front door for your user. And that all leads to the grand finale, user interaction, where your AI finally gets to do its thing for real people. Okay, so how do we actually do this? Well, you've got some choices to make. And honestly, the tools you pick are going to make a huge difference in how your app comes together. So the very first big choice you have to make is, where is this app going to live? You can run it locally, right on your own computer, which is awesome for testing things out or for personal projects. Or you can put it up on the cloud, using something like AWS or Google Cloud, so literally anyone on the planet can access it. Now, to actually build the thing, you've got some amazing tools at your disposal, especially in Python. You've got Flask and Django, which are total workhorses for building big, complex websites. But for our purposes today, we're going to focus on Streamlit. Why? Because it is an absolute game changer. It lets you build interactive apps with just Python, no web dev skills needed. It is ridiculously fast. Okay, enough talk, right? Theory is great, but let's actually build something. Let's get our hands dirty and create a simple but surprisingly powerful app, the AI News Sorter. So here's the mission. We're going to build an app that can take any news article you throw at it and instantly tell you what it's about. Is it science, politics, religion? Our natural language processing model is going to figure it out from a list of 20 different topics. The crazy part is how simple it is to get started. We're just going to import the library and give our app a title. That's it. It's like putting up the welcome sign for our users. And check this out. This is what's so cool about something like Streamlit. You get instant results. That one line of code we just wrote, it creates this clean, professional-looking web page. No HTML, no CSS. It just works. Okay, next up, we want to make this thing interactive, right? Let's give the user some options. We'll add a simple little drop-down menu so they can choose which AI model they want to use. This makes the app feel so much more dynamic. And boom, just like that, our app has an interactive element. A sidebar pops up with our drop-down, all neat and tidy, waiting for the user to make a choice. We've just opened up a whole new way for them to engage with the app. All right, one last piece for the interface. We need the Go button. This is the trigger. This is the button that says, okay, I've picked my model, now do the magic. So, think about what we just did. In just 3 little steps, a title, a drop-down, and a button, we've built the entire user interface for our AI app. It's clean, it's interactive, and now it's ready to be hooked up to the brains of the operation, our AI models. All right, this is the moment of truth. We built the car, we put the engine in. Now let's turn the key and see this AI news sorter actually work when we click that button. So, when you hit that classify button, what's happening in the background? Well, our app is firing up one of 2 really powerful models. There's Naive Bayes, which is kind of like a detective. It looks at all the words in an article and calculates the odds that it belongs to a certain topic. Then you've got the SVM, a support vector machine. This one is more like a super precise organizer, trying to draw the cleanest possible line to separate one type of news from another. And there you have it. This is our finished app. What started as just lines of code is now a simple, elegant tool. It's ready to take in a news article, run it through the AI model you picked, and give you an answer, just like that. So, does it actually work? Well, let's look at the numbers. The Naive Bayes model, it correctly classifies articles with a pretty darn impressive 91.5% accuracy. Not bad at all. But wait, it gets better. The SVM model, it does even better, hitting almost 94% accuracy. This just goes to show you the kind of serious power humming away behind that simple interface we built. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? It's that deploying an AI model isn't some crazy complex thing only giant tech companies can do anymore. With tools like Streamlit, it's become so much more accessible. You now have a clear path to take your projects and turn them into real-world products that people can actually use. And that really brings us to the final, bigger question. Getting the tech to work, deploying the model, that's the first huge step. But the next question, and maybe the most important one, is how do you design an app that isn't just clever, but is actually useful? Something that solves a real problem for someone. Because that's the difference between just a model and a real solution.
All right. Hopefully that didn't bore you to death, and I know you guys can watch that on your own, but I thought they did such a nice job of just kind of conglomerating it quickly and really probably sounding a whole lot more enthusiastic than I am in terms of like presenting the material, right? Like, I tend to be a little bit more human and like a drone, I guess. All right. So I think that gives us a good underpinning of what's possible here. Of course, that doesn't actually get us to the point where we're doing it. So I'm going to flip us over now to our PowerPoint slideshow, and I'm going to start like working our way through the materials here to kind of reinforce the concepts. So I'm going to bring this up on screen. I'm going to stay in this, I guess like editing mode as opposed to presentation mode. And let's go through some of the materials here, and then we'll get to the point where we're talking about Streamlit. All right, so just a quick recap of where we've been recently. And then, of course, where we're going to, and this matches our topic list, of course, in the course shell. All right, let's talk about model deployment. And we've talked, if you guys remember, we talked about ops and normally like in the computer development areas, software programmers, we're pushing our applications out to the world. We call that dev ops. So like the development that we created, we're going to put it into operation. It's just kind of like this little hybrid term. Of course, they've kind of hijacked it for all other things. So they talk about AI ops and ML ops and NLP ops, but really we're talking about deploying software, right? And every time we are working with Visual Studio Code, we're writing code, we're writing computer programs that do all this work, right? The computer programs, granted, we're using pre-built libraries, they're executing code, processing data, and doing the tasks that we're asking. And hopefully it works. And you guys know what challenges that has been to get some of the stuff working. But once we have stuff that works, deploying it really kind of becomes the next logical step. So what's the point of building software that nobody uses? You just do it for your own amusement? Well, I guess you can do it for educational purposes, but if you can actually deploy it and have it do something useful, it really is quite empowering, right? And for people that are in this program, that's not really a focus in the AI data program until we basically get to this course. We are going to be including the advanced Python course, in the AI data degree going forward, starting next academic cycle. And I do recommend that you guys take that course if you need an elective offering, because they do talk about more advanced programming skills and deploying things through frameworks like Django and Flask, which are part of tonight's topic. All right, so the whole point really becomes, let's figure out a way to kind of push that thing out there. So rather than just have a model that we trained and did all this work with, let's get it out into the world. All right, so they kind of give you this goofy little graphic here that shows that you start with data, you train a model, then you basically write a piece of software in one of these frameworks. And we're still going to be using Python, but we are now going to be using different libraries whose goal it is to basically put the content and make it available and usable, right? So in other words, instead of it just being code, it's going to be pushed onto a screen that people can interact with. The two platforms we're going to be looking at are Streamlit and Flask. Now, once you have that built, then that pushes out to the user in one method or another. Usually we have some piece of software running on a server, and that software is called server software that runs on top of the server, and then the user can interact with that server. That server can be local here on your own machine, or it can be pushed out to the cloud. Our focus here will be to do it locally, right? One of the reasons we don't push out to the cloud is because cloud deployment generally is not free. In fact, it becomes really quite expensive, especially when you start pushing AI models out there and people start using them. It can be really, really pricey, right? It takes a lot of computational power. All right, so let's kind of keep pressing forward here. They talk about the complete path to deployment, so let's just kind of quickly rifle through this. It says a machine learning model can be helpful, right? And we can evaluate all its insights and whatnot. The model is trained using training data. It learns features from the data. And then that machine learning model can be stored for future use so that we don't have to retrain it. So the principle is, right, you give it a large set of training data, and then once it's trained and it's behaving correctly because we've tested it, then we can start adding new information to it, and it should be able to do what it's supposed to do, whether it's classification or sentiment analysis or whatever, right? Deployment, it says, involves the usage of trained models, providing the users with predictions or outcomes that they're looking for. The server then loads the deployed model, which the users can interact with and see the results. All right, so basically we're going to put an application out there is what it's telling us. All right, let's start going through the some examples here so we kind of get grounded on this. They recommend looking at a recommender system, which happens to suggest users relevant items and options based upon your specifications, activity, or preferences. Now, this happens on social media all the time. This happens when you use browsers like Google Chrome, right? And I've been reading up on this topic quite a bit lately, where a lot of people find like what Google Chrome does pretty obtrusive. So for example, like you use Google Chrome and you go to a website, and let's say you're Googling a product you might want to buy, and you do some research on it. Then all of a sudden you go to like a newspaper site, and then an ad comes up for the product you were just Googling. How does that happen? It's not a mistake, right? Google's got all sorts of settings inside their browser. And then because Safari, Edge are also built on that same code base, they do the same thing, right? And you can even like bounce between browsers that have the same engine running, and they still share information with each other. If you want to block that kind of activity, by the way, you try a different browser, try like Brave or try Firefox, and then turn on its containers or turn on its privacy features to kind of block some of that tracking if you don't like that. But it is true that like if you go to a website, Google's a great, or excuse me, Facebook's a really good example. I know we've talked about this, where even the act of like scrolling through content, and for like a moment you pause and look at one post. You didn't click on it, you didn't like it, you just happened to pause there. They have engines in the background that analyze that. You know what? You obviously want to look at this thing about football, or this thing about exercise, or this thing about food, right? Because they all like every time we put food on the screen, they pause. All right, let's just give them more food then, right? And think about it. If you do that, on Facebook, and then you notice that pattern, I just want you guys to be aware of that. But companies that sell products really like to do this quite a bit, because like, for example, if I go to the Amazon website and I'm looking up, I don't know, books about Python code, right? And then I go to Amazon to, I don't know, watch a video or listen to music or buy something else, it's going to remind me that I looked at those Python things, and then maybe recommend that I buy them, right? So this is really valuable information to certain types of vendors. Right. So it says here, the company wishes to display product recommendations to users in a web application. Predictions should be given to the users whenever they request them. All right, so this is kind of interesting. So the deployment method provides the model's predictions available to the web application. So today we're going to see, it says how to do that using basically Streamlit is one of the things that we're going to work with. All right, so here's the problem situation that we're going to start to explore, is to develop a classification system to classify articles from different groups. The data set is 20 news group data sets comprising about 18,000 news group posts on 20 topics. And then let's start looking at the frameworks. All right, so that's kind of the grand goal of all the demos and stuff in the class here tonight. We are going to go after these incrementally. This is not material I've like rehearsed or anything like that, so it's going to be kind of fun to fumble through it, and I'm okay with that. I hope you guys are too. All right, so let's look at the types of deployment now as we move forward. And some of this we mentioned already. One way is to deploy on your own machine. So when we say locally, we mean this machine right here sitting in front of you that you're using for this class can act as a server to run your application, right? You can build the code and you can push out a screen to somebody to interact with it. The other approach is to put it on the cloud. It does have the advantage that it can run anywhere. You can put it on a mobile phone, your regular computer, whatever, wherever there's an internet connection, you can basically get to it, and whenever you have a device. Right. We did talk about the fact that that can get pretty expensive, though. When we do it locally, we will use a service, basically, and it's really what we call a web service that runs, in the background as a web server on your machine, and then that deploys your model and the screens we create to interact with it. There's a bunch of different frameworks that you can use. In the Python world, the popular ones are Flask and Django. And what these are basically web server software platforms that have their own framework for deploying Python applications to web screens, right? Really, truly, they are an entire framework, so you can build websites around them, and a lot of people use them as web backends. Um, if you're familiar with other web tools like Node.js or PHP, those are other platforms or frameworks that kind of do the same thing. But since we're all our coding in this environment is Python, it makes sense to use Python related frameworks to kind of push the stuff out. These are definitely the two most popular. We will be looking at Flask a little bit later. Um, all right. So it is also possible to use a different framework, one that we're going to focus on a lot, which is Streamlit. There are online examples and playgrounds, and we're going to look at one of those pretty soon here. Like Streamlit has a little environment where you can like type in their code, right? And they have a certain code syntax that they use with their libraries. And you can kind of see the results on the screen right in front of you in the browser, and it's kind of cool, right? The same code that you use inside that little playground, you can also use locally on your computer. Of course, if we're using the Streamlit library, we have to import that into our project, and then build basically the application in that thing. And that also can run locally, right? So it can deploy it locally on your own system. All right. It also kind of focuses here on a couple different things. I'm just reading about on the screen. All right, both are powerful apparently, and we can use both of them. All right, the second method approach is to deploy on the cloud. And the cloud, I mean, real frankly, we don't usually think about the cloud, right, until it has problems. You guys remember, I think last week we talked about that, how there was a big cloud outage on the internet, like AWS went down. And then I think, I don't know if it was the following Monday or Tuesday or something like that, Amazon Azure cloud also went down for a while. They had issues, and it makes you wonder sometimes if there are attacks on the platforms. But the three big cloud services that can deploy this kind of stuff pretty easily are the ones you see on the screen here. So AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, the Google Cloud Platform, or Microsoft Azure, right? None of those are free, by the way. They all cost money. With Microsoft Azure, if you're really truly interested, we do get free credits on Azure as students, but it's a very small amount of credits. And then if you burn through those credits and forget to turn your models off or your apps off, you'll actually accrue a bill, and they will send it to you, and it's not cheap, right? I know that I've mentioned in probably prior classes, in this program, that when I was in training, one of my instructors, we would do these like day-long training sessions, like 8 to 5, kind of thing. And then at the end of one of the sessions, he was demonstrating a database where he was extracting data on Azure. And then normally what he does is he spins it up for a few minutes, uses it, and then shuts it down, right? That way it's more affordable. But he forgot to turn it off at the end of class because somebody is asking a question, and he came back the next morning to a $250 bill, just to give you an idea. Now, if you're running a business on that and making money, maybe that's not a big deal. But that's a bitter pill to swallow. I don't know if he ever got his charges reversed, but man, that's a deep lesson to learn. If you are interested in these platforms, I'm going to argue maybe the easiest one to get started on is maybe Azure. And I can show you guys how to get into that platform if you're truly curious. Otherwise, you can go to AWS, and they have actually a few different cloud platform tools that you can use. But it is a popular tool, and you can spin up things like websites and apps and virtual desktops and databases and file storage and whatever, whatever you're willing to pay for, they can spin it up. And, once again, we're not going to walk these paths because of the cost generally. All right. Let's start looking now at Streamlit. And what we're going to do here is we're going to, talk about it first. We're going to go visit their website. And then we're going to start poking around with some of the tools. And then we're going to see if we can figure out how to make their website do the stuff that's being showed in the slides. And then eventually we're going to try to do it with our own code here on our own machines. Okay, so that's kind of the goal. Um, I do have also that goofy video that was provided by Intel, and sorry, Intel, no slam intended, but sometimes some of that stuff is kind of goofy. All right, so Streamlit is this platform, and this has been around for a bit, but basically people use it for the tasks that you see on the screen. They build dashboards, right? And think of what a dashboard is. Like, remember when we played with Tableau? You can kind of build a data dashboard, and a lot of people do that. You can build machine learning apps, and then you can launch basically web apps with really a modicum of code compared to most other frameworks. So most other frameworks really are not this easy for deployment. Um, and I know I've been mentioning that kind of over and over again, but like, talking about like Heroku or something like that. And I used to have my students in my web program build applications in Ruby on Rails, which is a language and a framework. And then we would deploy it on Heroku. And oh my God, it was like pulling teeth at the dentist and you didn't want to go. It was that kind of thing. And maybe it's gotten easier now, but it was a very steep learning curve and not a lot of instant gratification, basically, from doing it. But if you got it to work, it was pretty cool because it was a free platform and you could deploy live apps. And then of course, if you're trying to make money off of them, then you have to start to pay. Right. But that service is still out there. All right. One thing I guess I should mention here is I tried this link here before, and let's see if it loads up. I was getting this last time, and it's just blocking me from going, so I'm not comfortable with it. But you can go to the Streamlit website, which is just streamlit.io, and let me see if I can just put that in the chat for you guys. Here it is. And I'm going to go to their homepage here. And if you want, feel free to explore. Of course, they are, you know, pushing you to try their products, right? And they're showing you how simple it is to do this. And there it is. It's like it literally is kind of that simple, right? Like you then apply a model. And this little I'm just letting the demo run here. This is kind of a sales pitch for them. And I want you to notice too that they have a crash course on YouTube. So push comes to shove, we might go and check that video out, to help us kind of do some of this work. So the code that you're working with, and I don't know if you're picking up on this, right? You can do it in any editor that runs Python. So piece of cake, right? So I do it in Spider, I want to do it in Jupyter Notebook, I want to do it in Visual Studio Code, whatever. Streamlit basically does all the back end work that just makes it work. So this is kind of the neat thing with it. There are free versions, right? And there's pro versions too. But as I hover over the free, and I'm just going to click through and go here. You can come in here and you can do a sign in. And I think I'm going to set one up since we're coming into this space. But I think one of the things that they do here in this community area is they share a bunch of people's models and apps right here. So you can see what other people have done. And they might be really simple or it might be really fancy. I really kind of don't know. Let's kind of go through the sign-in process. I'm just going to kind of follow through. I'm going to sign in with my Google account right through school, and they should probably do the same. You can also sign in with GitHub if you have a GitHub sign in. I do have a school-based one also, but I prefer usually to sign in with Google. I find that's probably a little bit more secure. All right. And yeah, they're going to share all my personal information. That's okay. It's my school information anyhow. I'm going to go through and set up my account here. So I'm putting in my name, my email address. And I guess I have to pick my functional area. What's my functional area? Let's call it educator. Yeah, no, I'm not really sure. I'm going to say my app is ready to deploy. I don't think it really matters much, honestly. They just want to, gather information. And so we are going to come back to this space and see if we can work right here, right? So if you guys didn't do the sign in process, back on the home page, click the free account, click on sign in, connect up with your Google account or, create an account, whatever, and then get to this screen. And when you guys are here, please let me know. I'm going to pause the video for a moment. All right, I think I got everybody here now set up with a free account. I just want to emphasize again that use your student email account. That's the optimal one to sign in with. That way you don't have to, go through the process of creating. Once you're signed into your Gmail, you're signed in to this. The assumption here is that we're going to click the Create App button up in the corner there, like where they're pointing to, right? And then we're going to follow the PowerPoint slides to the best of our ability. And hopefully it matches up. And I'm not really sure how well it's going to match up, real frankly. I have not done this process in advance. So, hey, it's a learning curve, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click Create App, and it says, oh, so this is kind of an interesting feature. Guess what we're going to be doing here? It says, you must be connected to GitHub to deploy an app. All right, so here's what we're going to do. You guys, guess what? Today is the day you're getting your GitHub account if you don't already have one. All right, so let's do that. And you know what? This becomes kind of a nice little primer for this platform, which is a really important platform, by the way. I'm going to click on the main page here. I'm going to put the URL in the chat. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to describe what GitHub is, right? So you have some sort of an understanding of what, why this exists, who owns it, because that's important too, and what it's used for. All right, so let's answer the who owns it question first. This is actually now owned by Microsoft, which is kind of interesting. This, we thought it was a really weird move because this is always kind of like the spot on the internet where coders would come to basically share their code. Well, first of all, have a place to store their code, but then also share their code with other people and collaborate with other people. Some people use this platform to deploy applications, to sandbox applications, to share data, to share their code, whatever. One really interesting usage of the site during the pandemic, GitHub was the spot where they would publish, I think on an hourly basis, the COVID statistics, like when everybody was like getting sick and dying and all that stuff, and the whole thing was kicking in. This is where they shared the data. GitHub is basically what we think of as a code repository, right? And that word repository is really important. And it is free to use, but there are paid versions as well, right? I do already have an account, so I'm going to sign in with my account. But if you do not have an account, you must go through the sign up process, and that's not something I'm going to demonstrate. So if you guys are looking at my screen right now, what you should be doing is going into the sign up button and signing up for a new account and follow the steps that are involved in that. I'm not going to demonstrate that in the video. It should be fairly self-explanatory. Once the account is fully set up and operational, then we'll jump back over to Streamlit and start connecting so we can build our app. The interesting thing about this also is the Copilot AI tool that we have that comes from Microsoft. One of the first places they deployed it was here on GitHub. So can you imagine a place where you can kind of have a code repository and then also has an AI built in that helps you code? And then, of course, Microsoft grabbed Copilot and started putting it into all of their coding tools, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, and of course now it's in their browsers and their operating systems and Microsoft Office. all of that. The tool GitHub is pretty impressive in a number of different ways. I'm going right now to the sign-in screen. I do want you to notice that with the sign-in screen, you can sign in with your Google account as well. And I don't know if that's the way you guys chose to add an account, but that might be the easiest way, right? And once again, use your school account so it's all kind of linked together and unified, right? I'm going to go ahead and sign in since I already have a sign in. And then this is going to take me basically to my screen here. I don't really have a lot of stuff in here because I really am not an active user on here. If I was working out in the field, I might publish apps and stuff here. I do have a number of my students use this platform as their repository for their code. A really interesting tidbit, by the way, if you use a higher end IDE, and like Visual Studio Code, for example, does support this. Instead of saving your code files to your local file system, you can you can save them to GitHub directly on the internet, right? So in a way, this being, let's say, a code repository, right? And right now I'm clicking into like one of the code postings that I have. This is kind of like, you think of GitHub as kind of like Google Drive, but for code. You put your code out on the platform, you share it with other people, right? And then whenever you need your code, you can get it. You can open up the code directly from a coding engine if you wish. They're also, check it out, they have a code space, so I can code right inside the environment. And that's pretty cool. I haven't experimented with it much. I know that a lot of people that do code right inside this environment, though. I think another interesting aspect of this is, this concept of like when you're coding, instead of having the files on your local machine, they're actually in the cloud. And when you save them, they go to the cloud. And then it does like really cool things. Like whenever we're working on code that you're versioning, like on your own machine, like you're working on a project and then you've done so much work, but then you start working on it again. You don't want to lose the work you've done. So you make a copy of it and start working on the copy. GitHub does that automatically via a mechanism called forks. So you can try something on your code, and then if it fails, you never lost your original code. But if it worked, you can remerge, you can bring that fork back to the main code stream, and then that becomes your new version. So we call this kind of like a versioning repository. Just really basic stuff. The original version of Git, you could only run from a command line interface. But now, since it's included in a lot of IDEs, you don't have to worry about that. Clearly, Streamlit's going to push our code into GitHub because they don't want to store our code. See their thinking, right? And it's like, hey, there's this free code repository called GitHub. Why don't you just hook up to that, and we'll just, like, when you write your app, your stuff will go there. I'm going to pause here for a moment to ask a question. So just a moment here, folks. All right. I think everybody here in the class session has now created a GitHub account, and I think maybe the consensus is that using your Google account to sign in might be the easy way. Once you have that in place, of course, you can connect to GitHub, right? And it is asking to authorize a bunch of different things here. So notice all the different stuff that it's sharing. And if you have any issue with this, of course, you're not going to be able to proceed. The question I had before I hit record again here is this something we should be concerned with? And I would say only if you're really putting personal or sensitive information out there. Because we're using free GitHub accounts, none of it can be privatized. It's all public, right? There are paid versions of GitHub that you can make private, and professional coding firms do use it in that format. It's also, I think, important to note that GitHub's not the only platform like this. There's others. Bitbucket is another one that I've used in the past, and probably the only other real notable one, honestly. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just click authorize. I mean, if you're really curious to see like what they're doing, and I can click through. And yeah, they're, I mean, they're going to read my private email address, but they already got that by the form of my login, right? So we're okay. You know, it's not really a big deal. So I'm going to go ahead and authorize. All right. So now we're in the interface. Um, and let's take a look at the dashboard here. All right. So they have like three options, right? So I'm assuming that we're going to be building a new option. I'm actually click back. I'm curious to see where it's going to take me. Okay, it's just going to bounce me back and forth. Um, Now, I'm not going to deploy a public app from GitHub. We want to create an app from scratch. So I'm going to explore the interface here a little bit, which is something you should do. So there's settings and docs, my apps. Okay, I guess that takes you back there. Okay, so here's an interface, you know, where we can create, right. I guess a blank app seems like the right choice, right? Feels like the right choice. I am going to look at these other menu options though, quick. All right. I just want to see what's in there. All right. And here's some examples of apps that are already built. And you can see they have chatbots and everything as well. And then they have a whole discussion board here. Okay. And all right, I'm going to avoid that for right now. All right. So I think it seems pretty obvious to me that the blank app is what we want. So I'm just going to click on that. And I want you to notice that what they're doing here is they're giving us a screen, right? So this is going to be called blank app. And I don't know if what we want to call this. We could call it something else. But what this is going to do is it's telling you right here, this is basically going to create, like, if you want to think of it this way, a folder in your GitHub repository. And really, this is a new repository. And then it will generate a URL for the app. So like once we build something in here, you can actually see it on the internet. Pretty cool, right? And the reason that this works, and you know, it makes me think that maybe this is a better way to do the homework overall, is because it can draw from GitHub, it grabs the code, spins it up, and then pushes it through their web server. Pretty cool, you know, generally speaking. All right, so let's come up maybe with a better name. I guess blank app is kind of lame.
How did you get to the screen?
Say that again, Paul.
How did you get to the screen? What did you click on?
All right, I went to the My Apps menu item.
Okay.
And then I clicked on My New App, which is just a blank app.
So you didn't go to create an app?
I did, but then it brought me here. And then I, you know, so these are not, you know, and I'm not sure, maybe if I clicked here, yeah, this isn't an app I want to build, right? I just want to build a blank app. So this is the option. So My Apps, blank app. Not
Then
very intuitive.
create an app or My Apps?
No, once again, if I click create app, it brings me here.
Yeah.
Which is none of what I want, which takes me back here.
Oh, okay. I see down in the bottom, My New
Right.
App. Okay, I got you.
I think the whole reason for this button is if you're not signed into GitHub or they don't have access to your GitHub, they're not going to let you build one. That's what that button's about. So My Apps, My New App. I'm going to call this something other than what this is because I don't think blank app is a good one. Let's call it test app. And you know what? Maybe it'll become something more than that, but for now, I'm calling it test app. It should update the URL. Well, not really. You know, but you can customize your URL too. If you don't like what it's giving you, you can type in something different. I'm just going to kind of stick with that. I'm okay with it. Now, right now, if I hit the button, it will deploy, it'll take this blank app and deploy it, right? But we want a code in here, right? And so my temptation now is to open the GitHub code spaces and see what happens, right? This is an exploration for me as much as it is for you. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to open GitHub code spaces to immediately edit this app in your browser. All right. Let's see what happens here.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, Martin.
Um, the assignment has nothing to do with what we're doing right now, right? This is not the assignment. It's in other words.
Yeah, this is not the assignment. This is us learning the ropes.
Okay.
It might, and the truth be told, it might be leading us towards the assignment, but not exactly.
Okay.
All right. I think this is pretty fascinating. Do you guys notice that when we're inside the code space of GitHub, what is our tool? Visual Studio Code running in the browser. How do you like that? Right. So I love it. They even have the AI tool off to the side. So now I feel more comfortable already. Right. So we'll see how this goes. Right now, I see that little thing spinning up top here, and I don't know if it's still building out the space or what it's doing. And I think we're still populating the content here. So we're going to be patient for a moment while it does its work. All right. How about we do this? Because we are more than halfway through already. Let's do our 5-minute break. So this might take a moment to propagate. Oh, there it goes. Like the moment I say that. But let's still take a 5-minute break. Okay. I'm going to pause the video. We'll see you guys at 6:47. All right. For those of you that might have missed the steps or we went too quick or whatever happened, when we were on this screen here at Streamlit, I was on the My Apps tab, and then I clicked on My New App, which took me here. I filled in a name, and then I clicked this little box here and hit Deploy. When I did that, it put me into GitHub, and GitHub has a built-in coding environment. Mind you, right? GitHub is owned by Microsoft, so they've deployed Visual Studio Code in the browser inside of GitHub. So like one of the benefits of having a GitHub account is that you got a coding tool right inside that platform. I do always forget that because I'm not a big user of it, but this might be a really good workaround for, like, sometimes I get students from high school that are coding on Chromebooks and they can't save their files and weird stuff like that. So this might be a good workaround for them. It does take a little while to deploy because what it's doing in the background is it's loading up all the sample app, the server, all the Python code that creates it. It's also running the Visual Studio Code environment. So it took a little bit to get it up on the screen. But it is a fully functional Visual Studio coding environment, right? And you can see it has all the different sidebars, even the AI agents there. The way that the screens are broken down right now, they do have the File Explorer open here. The coding window, which will be this small square. Right now, it's on the README for the application. And I don't know if you guys notice here on the side, this little test app, right, is now, a code repository on GitHub. And I did hit the little expander here that shows me all the files within it. And the one we're looking at right now is the README, which is just information about the app. Notice it does provide some information, right? A simple Streamlit app template for you to modify. Great, thank you. Right. And then it says how to run it on your own machine. And it tells you to install the requirements, and they have the requirements text there. and then you run the app, which runs Streamlit in the background, and then you can do the same thing we're doing here. You can do on your own machine in principle. So I guess at some point we should try that too, right? Now, if this works out really well in browser like this, I might be really compelled to just push you guys to do it like this, right? So we'll see how it goes. Right now, I'm going to close the README file because that's not our code file, right? That's just an info file. And then over here, you know, if you want to see the output, they have like a little browser window that appears inside Visual Studio Code that basically shows you, you know, the changes you make to the application, right? Now, if you look at the basic code that we have here, we're going to go back to the PowerPoint here in a minute and follow that code. But look at, you know, all the different settings and stuff here. And like one thing I'm seeing is like, oh, they don't have word wrap turned on, right? So can I turn on word wrap here? Yep, I'm pretty sure you can. There you go. I just turned it on. Right. So it just went to the little menu, view, and word wrap. And the hotkey for that's Alt Z. All right. I did move my sidebar over a little bit because I figure I can collapse that down. I'm not sure that I need the AI engine at the moment, so I'm collapsing that down. But I am going to see if I can zoom in on the code here. All right, well, that zooms in the whole darn browser window. Let me see if I can just zoom in on the panel. Nope, maybe I can do it through the menu. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a, you know, a super easy way to do it. So you know what? I'll just zoom in like one click in the browser. Control plus is how you do it. And I know that's kind of small. Hopefully it's not too small for you guys to see. Anybody having a problem seeing it? Okay, George is nodding yes. All right, George, I'm going to go one more click then. A little better? Okay. Hopefully that works. I do want you guys to notice at the bottom of the window here, right, that it has a couple of suggestions too. It says you can now view your Streamlit app in your browser, and notice that they give you the IP addresses to do so. That's kind of interesting. It seems to open up a pipeline on that port. Locally, any one of those URLs would work. I am on the VPN on campus, so I'm getting a campus IP address here. But I'm going to try the local host really quick before we do any coding. So I'm clicking, and let's see if it loads up. Okay, yeah, it's running. There it is, running on my own computer. Pretty darn slick. Yeah. All right. So we know it works, you know, so that it is propagating to a local server here on my machine. I'm pretty impressed with the tech they've put together here, real frankly. All right, let's examine this just a little bit. And the first thing that we're noticing is that up at the top here, we are importing Streamlit, and then we're aliasing it as ST. We're giving it a title. Notice that you can put emojis, and this is kind of something we haven't talked about in Python at all. But I don't know when it happened, like 3-4 years ago, they came up with a standard set of emojis that work across all platforms. And if you know how to invoke the emojis from your keyboard, you can add them to your code. So that's how the balloon is getting here, right? You know, so you don't have to have the balloon, by the way. And if you want to make sure that it's working, you don't have to call your app my new app. I'm going to be brave and call it Ties Test App. And yeah, you know, they got a balloon in here, but yeah. Let's ask Google how to type an emoji in Windows. And I know that on an Apple, I think you just hit, I forget if it's the function key or the option key or something like that. So you use the Windows key plus a period. So I'm going to try that. Windows key and a period. Where the heck is the period? Oh, there it is. Oh, there's my emoji panel. All right, got it. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to try that. You know, if you guys want to try that in your code, here's a hot new tip, folks. Add emojis to your code. So I'm doing Windows, period, and then I can look through all the different. Oh, I can put in like Kermit the Frog. Sweet. All right. And I know there's huge libraries of these. So I don't know. I'm going to find something that appeals to me here. Oh, how about a football? There we go. All right. Want to make sure that this worked. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hit rerun, and there's my football and the name change. So try that, right? If you guys could, right? And I know for you guys, this is pretty exciting because none of you are web developers, but like when I do like web development with my web students, I mean, this is the kind of stuff we do, right? All right. The other thing is here, there's a message that says, let's start building. For help and inspiration, head over to, and they give you like a link, but let's change that text. Let's just practice doing that. I'm just going to say something really simple like, this is my first app in this environment. This is just a test, but I do think it cool because it seems so easy. And ... you can add emojis. So I'm gonna throw in another emoji since I'm all proud of myself for figuring out how to do it. Actually, I'm gonna put in a Patrick here. Can I do that? Oh no, it doesn't like that. All right. Yeah, it doesn't like it does not like me putting a Patrick emoji in there, but let's just stick with emojis. Let's do the OK symbol. I think that's pretty good. All right. Once again, I'm going to rerun it just to prove that I can change the contents. I'm curious if here on my screen, if I refresh, there it is. Okay. So it's even working across the internet. So I want you to think about what we're doing here. And I'm really strongly thinking this might be the better way to create the homework. Right. I don't have to worry about pips. I don't have to worry about, are you guys feeling me? Right. All right. So smart minds think alike sometimes. All right. Let's now pop back to the PowerPoint finally. And let's go here and see if we can create the stuff that they're showing here. So I just want to show you what they're doing. It looks like they're going to throw a sidebar up, a title, a select box, a button. And that's kind of this is kind of what we're shooting for, I guess. This is, what I'm getting out of this. Okay, first thing. So they have, so you get your import statement in there, and then you put in your title. Now we've kind of done this already, right? So here's our import, and here's our title. And we know they're working, right? Not a problem. I think what I might do here, and I think George will thank me for this. I'm going to get rid of the Explorer and then go in one more click. And this panel at the bottom, I don't think we're going to need so much either. I'm not sure about that right now. All right. So we used an alias for Streamlit of ST. So anytime we say ST, we mean Streamlit. We did st.title, parentheses. It's kind of like a write line statement or a print statement in Python, and that creates the title. We also did a write, right? So we tried those two. So when they show us those, we can say, hey, been there, done that. And of course, feel free to tinker with the stuff as we're moving forward. So I think we got the title okay. Next, it wants us to create a select box. A select box is basically a drop-down box on a form. But it looks like we want to drop in options. We're going to give them options 1, 2, or 3. And then we're going to basically borrow this code. So here's what I'm going to do for you guys. If you don't have the PowerPoint open, which you probably don't, I'm going to be throwing the code in the chat because I'm going to copy it verbatim. And then we're going to go over to Visual Studio Code here in the browser and simulate this. I'm going to leave the stuff I have already. I'm going to paste that code in. So we're setting up a Python list. Now we do have a problem here. Here's the problem with this code. The quotation marks here in PowerPoint. And so you guys are going to, I don't know if that happened in the chat also, are what we call smart quotes. Regular quotes are straight up and down. These angle in or angle out. So you're going to have to fix all those here. So I'm going to come in here and, okay, oops, I broke it out a little bit more. So this is part of the hard work you have to do here tonight is fix your double quotes. All right. No more red underlines. All right. So basically what we're doing is we're setting up a Python list called options. Then the select box has 2 parameters. One will be a title that says pick an option. The box will appear and the box will be populated by whatever options I put in this list. And then the user will, excuse me, select from that list, and that whatever they select, 1, 2, or 3, will get stored in this variable here. That's the mechanics of what's going to happen. Right. And I want you to think about this. If you've taken the Python, advanced Python class where you learn a little bit about GUI, this might not be new. But for most of you, you've never done any GUI programming, right? So we're doing GUI programming here. I'm going to go ahead and rerun the code. And then I want you to notice here that I have a select box and I can click on it and I can choose a value. All right. Pretty simplistic, but powerful. I'm going to test to see if it reached my local browser here. And there it is. All right. So it's working in the local browser across the internet. Pretty slick. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you know, if you guys knew like the rigmarole I had to go through to originally code any mechanisms like this for an application before there were graphical tools to do it, oh my God, it was a nightmare. You know, and to just be able to do it that quickly and easily is pretty darn impressive. All right, everybody okay? Just in case you didn't fix the double quotes, let me know and I can paste the completed code for you. Back over to the PowerPoint now. All right, we already did a couple examples of the ST, or one example of the ST write statement. So if you guys want to add some more, just do it just to practice. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I'm just going to say something silly. That's all the stuff I have to say. And of course, rerun it and you can see that your text makes it over to the other window. You know, if you find this screen an annoyance, you can just look at it here, right? But I think it's pretty cool that we can very easily add the stuff and it just appears, right? Very cool. All right, making some more blank lines here, moving on in the slideshow. All right. All right. They have a little activity for us here, which is basically to go to this URL. This is a live URL. It does work. And it'll allow you to see all the common commands for this library. Okay, so, and the question becomes, which command other than stwrite, according to you, can be used to display text on the screen? Okay, so let's go take a look. I do have this already open in browser somewhere. Yeah, that becomes the challenge now is to find it. I guess I'm going to repropagate it here. Oh no, I see it now, right there. All right. So that link takes you here, right? So I want you to take a look at this now. We were asked to figure out what other ways can we get text on the screen. And I want you guys to notice here, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it, right? And I think it depends on like what you're trying to accomplish. We've tried title and we've tried write. And then I'm noticing here, they got different versions of it as well. And then I want you to notice as well how many other different things you can do here. And I'm getting very excited about looking at all these like tools they have built in automatically, right? So like, from a matter of just putting information on the screen, okay, that's pretty straight ahead, I think, right? And some of these use different formats and stuff. To put interactive form elements, we've put in a drop-down box, right? But notice all the different stuff you can put in: download buttons, camera input, yada yada yada. You can also connect to data, display data, and they give you examples. If you want to load up a data frame, you can put audio and video. Okay, now I'm getting excited. You can put images in there. Oh my gosh, right? I'm getting a little stoked, by how simple they're making it. But I was kind of looking at this stuff here that it was like, oh, I can build a chat bot, kind of like, wow, okay, we'll check that out too. And it goes on and on, right? So I can see a lot of usages for this for sure. A lot of usages. It's really actually kind of making me pretty excited to introduce myself to this tool here. All right, let's get back on track though. So we did this, right? So we found that there's a whole bunch of tools. And please feel free to explore and experiment to your heart's content, right? You want to drop a video in your app? Hey man, it's on you. Figure it out. I'm sure there's tutorials on it. All right. Let's talk about what else we can add. Another thing that we can do is to add a button. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add a classify button. And notice you can just use this code directly. So it's just ST button, parens, and classify. I think I can remember that enough to just type it. So you guys should probably do the same. So ST button, parens, and then inside quotes, classify. Right, I'm going to rerun the code, and then you'll notice I have a classify button. Woo, pretty exciting. That was very exciting indeed. All right, so that was the classify button. Now you can program the button to do something. And this is where it gets fun. Now to run a block of code, clicking on a button, one needs to put an if block. That's not very good English, by the way. So, all right. So it says if this seems like really simple code. If ST button classify, in other words, if you clicked on it, then it's going to give you a message, that you clicked the button. Let me see if I can just paste this into the chat, you guys. Yeah, it does bring back memories of web dev, doesn't it, Laura? Right. I forgot you took that HTML class, right? Yeah, absolutely. Be mindful of the quotes and single quotes being slanted. If they're slanted, they won't work. I'm just going to paste this right into the coding engine here, and let's see what happens. So we created the button, and now we're putting in code that handles the button click. I'm going to rerun the page, and it is giving me errors. I see. Okay, so I think I'm understanding here. So if I do this, this creates the button and reaction. So I'm going to just get rid of this for a moment. Let's put in a Python comment here. How do you do a Python comment? All right, there's a quiz in the moment.
Hashtag.
Right on. All right, let's rerun it again. All right, there's our button. Right, and I'm going to click it. All right, you've clicked the button. Thank you. All right. So that's all it takes to put something on the screen. Once again, very impressed with the simplicity. I'm digging it. All right, moving on to the next slide. Next, we're going to create a sidebar. All right. So basically, this will be a column on the left, it looks like. And in fact, we can borrow this code as well. Throw it in the chat. Save you the typing. And I'm going to do the same. So I'm just going to drop that in right here. I'm also going to add a note little here for myself that says you can just put it in the if statement. That's for my own sake. All right, pasting in the code. All right, looks like the syntax is okay. Let's go ahead and rerun it and see what happens. All right, I'm not sure that anything happened. Let me go to my main browser here, and I think it's because that little browser is too small. I'm speculating. I'm right. So this, I'm running it in the big browser instead. And isn't that cool? Like it did create the sidebar. Oh, not only that, but it's got little buttons for expanding and contracting it. Pretty slick. And then it also, okay. Oh, fascinating. All right. I can record a screencast of this. Very fascinating tool. I'm getting more and more enthused by it, folks. All right. Now we can add components to the sidebar. So notice if you want to add a button to the sidebar, you just use this code. So you just really basically the same code you were using before, but you're inserting sidebar in the naming. So let's just try it. And I'm curious if I made this wider. Oh yeah, there you go. Now I can see the sidebar. Right. Rerunning. And there's the button. Of course, it doesn't do anything yet, but I think you guys already figured out like how to make it do something. So if you want, it's not a big deal. If you want to add, you know, an if statement to it, a colon, and then do an st.write, you know, you just make it really simple, really. Say, oh, wow. Rerunning. Oh, interesting. But it wrote it over here, not over there. So I'm wondering if I want to write it in the sidebar, I probably have to say sidebar. And so I think I'm impressed with how intuitive it is and how easy it is. Very cool. Just, I can have fun all night long with this one. All right. All right. So we can also add a select box over there. I think we're figuring this out, but let's do the same thing. I assume we're going to use the same options, right? Or we're going to create an options 2. They didn't give us the code for that, but it looks like it's going to be 4, 5, and 6. So let's see if we can just extrapolate all this on our own. I think we're kind of getting to the point where we're getting it now. So I'm going to copy that, paste it here, give it a options 2 name, and then give it 4, 5, and 6. And by the way, you don't have to stop there, and you can put whatever you want in here, like whatever. And I think I'm betting I could also put in, and let's test my theory here, an emoji. Let's try it, right? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's not going to work, basically. All right. Then we're going to do a select box, and it's going to be st select box, but we want that in the sidebar, right? Okay, so we're going to do sidebar dot select box, and then that has parameters. Do you guys remember what the parameters are? Okay, one is the description. Choose one of these, and then a comma after the double quotes, and then what data we're feeding into it, which is going to be options 2, like that. If you want the code, if you haven't typed it yet, there it is. Oh, look, the emoji even traveled through the thing. All right, I'm going to rerun, and then selecting, and look, I got a whatever and an emoji. Think of the possibilities, folks. All right, so now they're telling us that, oh, hey, by the way, this is how you type the Streamlit code. And I think what would be a really good experiment, and I know we're getting kind of short on time here, would be basically to try doing this coding straight up on your own local system with Streamlit. I'm assuming you might have to get all the requirements downloaded. And I think that if you did it through Anaconda, it would probably help you. But I really frankly think that this environment we're coding in on GitHub is probably the bomb and probably the way to go. All right. I am tempted to try this, but when you are on your own machine, right, of course, Streamlit, once you invoke it to run, and you have to do that at a command prompt, it'll tell you what your address is, but it looks like it likes to use port 8501 either way, right? So, hey, that's fine. We're already doing that. Okay. So they're asking us to do an activity here. I think this is one you can probably do on your own, but I am going to take us there momentarily. And they want to put us in which category? NLP and language. So I'm just going to go here. I am zooming in a little bit so it's easier to see. Okay, so they have a couple of things here that we can look at. I'm not sure what to try. Let's just check it out real quickly. So this is somebody else's app that they've deployed. Okay, this is kind of interesting. So, all right. So it looks like you can drop a file in here, a CSV file or a Excel thing, and then you can kind of cluster the information. This would be kind of interesting to try. Here's a really weird thing I'm going to do. So like in our course shell here, in the zip files that are provided, and it might not be in the student one, it might be here, but I already have access to it here on my system. I don't need to travel out to get it. So I'm just going to pull it up here. Okay, I guess not. I knew one of them had a data file, so I guess not. Let me, maybe it was the Flask example. Okay, here's a file. Okay, so I'm going to try that file. And now let's see if I can get back to where I was. which tab? Probably the last one, right? There we go. So I'm just going to drag that file here. It's kind of interesting that you can drag and drop. Okay, it doesn't like the encoding of the file. Okay, whatever. All right, so I'm trying to do an example. I don't have a file that works, but the point is that people have, like, you can set it up so that you can drag and drop files in to analyze. I think this is really potentially very cool, folks, right? So feel free to explore other people's tools. I'm not going to spend any more time on that right now. Let's keep kind of pressing forward with the material and see how far we can get. All right, we are at 7:22. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about Flask a little bit. Since this one isn't technically required to do our work, I don't think I'm going to go through the process of demonstrating it, but I'm going to talk about, what it is so you guys are aware. I don't know if you guys are noticing, but there's a whole ton more slides after this. Yeah, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll for a little while past the end time of class just to record material. I might not push it out too far. We'll see kind of how I feel. We'll make a judgment call on it basically. But you're welcome to stay, and you don't have to stay though, right? I'm just letting you know. So when 7:30 hits, you want to go. I'm going to publish the video tomorrow anyhow, but I do want to capture the information. Kathleen, I'm still determining that question, but thank you for asking. Right now, basically what it is to follow the assignment PowerPoint and then basically build out a Streamlit app with a live model powering it, right? I think this one might have to be guided. Ultimately, we'll figure it out, right? As we're kind of going. So I'll try to get more specifics in there. So I did put a little note in that said, caution, this might change or more details might come, so just be mindful of that. All right, let's talk a little bit about Flask now. And Flask is basically another framework written in Python, and its goal is to make things easy, kind of like Streamlit does. I don't know that it's quite as easy as Streamlit. In fact, I know for a fact it's not. It is a framework, right? So in other words, when we write web pages, right, or whatever, we write code that shows people a screen. But in order for the web pages to do something, we usually have programming code on the back end, and then usually connect to a database or data source or something. And then the back end code pushes the information back to the screen for the user. What I'm really impressed with Streamlit is we're writing the back end code and it pushes out to the browser automatically. We don't have to worry about the code for the browser at all. I don't think that's the case with Flask, but maybe it is. I mean, we'll see as we kind of work here. So it says it's another popular framework, but if you want, it says look here. Let's go ahead and just look very quickly at this website where they do have a tutorial that talks about how to do some screens like this, right? And you notice very quickly that you can kind of build stuff. So I would encourage you to walk through that. Basically, if we're going to deploy Flask, it happens once again by calling in a bunch of libraries, and then ultimately we're going to write back-end code that pushes to the front end in the web browser. So you have to import Flask. You initialize an app, right? So this is the process for initializing an app. And then you set up the root URL, and then you can return it, and then, of course, run it. And, of course, this will run on a different port. But it seems like it's pretty darn easy to do. I'm almost kind of tempted to spin it up, but I'm looking at the time and thinking that's probably not practical right now. And then, so like if you can load this code up in your engine and run it, it should be able to deploy. That's the whole thing with it. So, all right. They talk about how this works. This does remind me a little bit of how ASP.NET is propagated, by the way, which is a different web technology, but a Microsoft one. and they basically have a couple of functions that are built in. So you have to basically set up a route, which sets up the URLs for the application. Then you come up with the functions you're going to run within it that push content to the screen. And then ultimately you have to tell it to run. This is very, very similar to ASP.NET. And I'm sure they probably use that as a model or something. When it comes time to run it, you usually launch it from, the command line or from within your IDE. Like if you have your code in your IDE, there's no reason why it would not run. So let's now move past this and kind of look at, an app deployment and how we would ramp it up, to, essentially get to the point where we're doing our homework in this class and get a live model out there. So we have a problem, and it says to summarize, develop a classification system to classify articles performing to different groups. Okay. The data set would be 20 newsgroup data set, 18,000 newsgroup posts on 20 topics. All right. This is something we've been kind of looking at all along, but here's a flowchart version of it where we train our data, we do our data pre-processing, we tweak our features, right? We modify our models, then we train our model, we look at it, is it working right? We tweak it, we train the model, keep going. And then finally, hopefully we get to a deployed model that's ready to take any input data and work correctly. And that's, new input, we pre-process that data and then apply it to the model and it should work, right? According to its training. And then we have the output that we predict, and then we categorize things or do whatever the model does, right? And it says we're going to train our model offline to detect classes from 20 newsgroup data sets. And I think that's part of the Python files that are provided in this unit. And we'll classify it into genres like religion, science, computer, etc. The point is we're going to save our model to call it when necessary. And then our challenge will become to deploy it in a web app that uses the model in the code and gives real-time predictions for new data. So we're going to create this interface that allows us to interact with that model, throw it new information, and then have it classify the information coming back to us. We're going to use two different classifiers, right? So if you remember the naive Bayes and the SVM, and those are models that we can just pull in, of course, to help us with that process. All right, so a little bit of recap here on the models that we've built in previous weeks, right? So the naive Bayes, once again, one of the simpler models used for classification, and it assumes that all features of the input data are independent of each other, right? So we got diamonds, triangles, and circles, and it goes through a classifier, and then it correctly organizes them, right? We also have the support vector machine. This one should ring a bell at least a little bit. We are using this typically for segregating data into classes, and that little diagram I think is a pretty good one. Here they show the hyperplane as a straight line, but it could be much more complicated than that. And what we're really trying to do is to get complete separation of the different categories. It is a type of supervised learning algorithm, and given data points that belong to one of two different classes, it can classify the points correctly. Now, the training data that we're going to use is available here. And I suppose maybe I could have grabbed this data set to feed into that other model that we were looking at. But let's go ahead and follow this link. This does take us out to Kaggle. So I'm just going to go out there and grab the data set. And notice there's a download button right here. Right? I'm just going to go ahead and click it. And then it'll come down as a zip. This is 27 megabytes. This is kind of interesting. I guess I'm not really paying attention to what I'm seeing on the screen here, but it looks like if we want, we could import Kaggle Hub and pull the data set directly from this location. I think this is kind of interesting. So you know what? I'm still going to go ahead and download the data set, but now I really want to try this to see if it works. And I would have to put that, of course, in Visual Studio Code or somewhere to do this. So I'm just going to make a quick little Python file. I'm just going to drop this on my desktop. I know this is kind of weird, and I'm going to call it test Kaggle.py. And I'm just going to paste that code in. I'm going to save it. And okay, I want to trust this workspace. And now that I've trusted it, I should be able to run it. And let's see. Okay, so I don't have the Kaggle hub, so I guess I have to import that. So I guess I have to do the whole pip thing. So, you know, I think I'm not going to spend time on that right now, but I think that this is a possibility that we can pull in our data sets this way. And maybe we can do it through Anaconda. And in fact, maybe let's just bring up Anaconda really quick and see if it's one that's listed there. I think this is pretty exciting because if you can just pull down the data directly by just doing an import and it saves you the download, I mean, hey, you know, right on. And then when we're doing our Streamlit apps, maybe we can pull in our data the same way. Of course, that takes forever to load. All right, I'm just going to let it keep loading because I know many of you are going to have that question about it. I do wonder, though, if I was in this environment and I just created I'm going to put test Kaggle.py here. And I'm going to try the code right here. You know, why not? Right? I mean, what's going to happen? Worst thing that'll happen is it won't run, basically. So I'm going to run this. All right, same issue, right? So then what do we have to do is we're going to have to probably do pip install Kaggle Hub. I'm speculating, right? It looks like that's working. Okay. Looks like it did it. I don't see any errors, right? Okay, so I'm going to bring this down. And then I'm going to try to run this code again. And folks, it works. All right. So a simple pip install Kaggle Hub did it. And it worked inside this environment. So win-win, right? So we can pull our data source in then very easily into our sample application. Very excited about that too. Okay, let's go back now. So let's assume we have our data set. And here's that has a little instructor. If you want to see the classes in the data set, you can type out this command. Oh, and I see it. It shows you all the news groups. All right, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have closed that file so quickly. Since it's running in this environment, actually not this environment, but in this environment, I'm going to move this over for right now. I'm going to bring up that test Kaggle thing, and I'm going to try that next line of code. So let's just borrow this. I do notice angled quotes on this one. So I'm going to have to fix those. Oops. There it was. And it looks like this is, yeah, it doesn't like the indent. So let's bring that back. There we go. All right. I'm going to go ahead and run this again. Now we have the data set, so maybe this is kind of superfluous, but whatever, no harm done. It'll pull the data set in again, and then it is giving me an error message. Oh, fetch 20 news group subset. Okay, so it's telling me that this is not defined. All right, I don't know where. Data target names. Oh, okay. I think I get what they're saying. This really, I think, probably needs to be typed at the prompt after we load. But it's not finding that function, so it's calling it an undefined variable. All right, we're gonna have to work on that one. Yeah, I'm not sure what they're really intending from that. All right, I'm moving on. All right, so now we're going to get on to the model building part of this. All right, so now we're going to have to go back and start doing some of these steps. And I think I might be reaching the point where I think we should maybe take a break and then kind of revisit this topic. I think that we're going to kind of get into some deeper waters here. I'm not really sure I want to walk these right now, if you feel what I mean. But please feel free to just follow the instructions here and try to work through it on your own. I think that we're going to have to do a whole bunch of different imports, right? And basically, I think what they're going to walk us through here is getting Streamlit in, importing all of this stuff, and I think this is the piece we're missing here, right? You know, notice how they're so this is part of sklearn, you know, basically is why it's not working. Okay. And then of course this data set comes with the sklearn library. Okay, so that solves that problem. Okay, so that's why it wasn't working, right? So it needs all those libraries. And then we do these steps. So these are kind of steps in kind of solving this. All right. From there, you're going to go to pipeline design, but I think this is really kind of a place to stop. So I'm gonna cap the lecture and the recording here, and then at some point I'm going to go in and try to like code this stuff and demonstrate it. I don't know when that's happening exactly. Hopefully it'll be soon. You know, if I get ambitious, I'll try to do it tonight, but I kind of feel like I'm reaching that point of burnout for tonight. So, all right, folks, I'm going to cap this here. And when we come back, we'll pick up around here. I probably have to backtrack a little bit to get it to work. So it will probably pick up here, I would think. All right, folks, until next time, this video ends here.